After a mysterious accident, the cold CEO Lee Jin-woo feigns unconsciousness, hoping to unmask traitors. But it's his daughter's sweet nanny, Park Min-ji, who surprises him with words that reveal unexpected kindness, shaking his cynical world. The monotonous hum of medical equipment in the luxurious room seemed to amplify the echo of Park Min-ji's words in Lee Jin-woo's mind. He must be so lonely. The phrase, spoken with genuine melancholy, pierced the armor of cynicism he had built over years. No one ever had expressed concern for his loneliness. Everyone saw him as the ruthless CEO, the arrogant millionaire, the man who had everything except perhaps a heart. But Min-ji, the nanny he barely knew, had seen something more. His body remained motionless, eyes closed, breath regular and artificially controlled. But inside, Jin-woo was in a turmoil. He expected to hear whispers of greed, schemes of usurpation, perhaps even relief at his condition. Instead, he heard compassion, a compassion that asked for nothing in return. Min-ji, unaware of the earthquake her words had caused, moved with silent grace around the room. She adjusted Jin-woo's blanket with a light, almost reverent touch, as if fearing to disturb him, even knowing he was unconscious. Then she turned to little Lee Ha-eun, who was sitting on the soft rug playing with a teddy bear. "Ha-eun, Min-ji whispered, her voice soft as silk. "Your daddy will be fine. He's strong, you know, and he loves you very much." She picked the girl up, nestling her against herself. Ha-eun, usually a reserved child, seemed to find immediate comfort in the nanny's arms, resting her head on her shoulder. Jin-woo observed everything, every detail. The way Min-ji combed his daughter's hair with her fingers, the affection in her eyes, the patience in her voice. He had never seen Ha-eun so at ease with anyone who wasn't him. And even with him, there was an invisible barrier, a reflection of his own coldness. Min-ji, in just a few hours, had broken that barrier with the girl. His attention, previously divided between the various monitors and the door, was now fixed on Min-ji. He studied her, trying to decipher the enigma of her kindness. She wasn't like the others. The private nurses who attended him before were efficient but distant. The mansion's employees, respectful but fearful. His own family, with their calculated smiles and appraising glances. Min-ji was different. She was genuine. Later, while Ha-eun slept peacefully in her crib in the next room, Min-ji returned to Jin-woo's room. She picked up a damp cloth and began to gently wipe dust from a bookshelf. Her movements were methodical, but not mechanical. There was a dignity in her simplicity. "Mr. Lee," she murmured, not expecting a reply, as if talking to herself. "Your daughter is such a sweet girl. She just needs a little warmth. And I think you do too." She paused, the cloth in her hands, and looked at him. Her brown eyes were deep, filled with an understanding he hadn't expected. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of her. And I'll take care of this place too, until you come back." A shiver ran through Jin-woo, a shock that had nothing to do with the accident. It was the first time someone had promised to take care of him without an ulterior motive. Min-ji's humility, her silent dedication, her unexpected empathy were dismantling his facade brick by brick. He had feigned a coma to hunt wolves, but had found an angel instead. And for the first time in a long time, Lee Jin-woo felt a strange and unsettling sense of hope. He needed to know more about Park Min-ji. He needed to understand. The shiver that ran through Jin-woo wasn't from cold, but from an emotion he couldn't name. "Take care of this place too, until you come back." Min-ji's words echoed, laden with a selfless promise he had never received. In his world, everything had a price, every gesture a hidden intention. But Min-ji, she seemed to operate under a completely different moral code. He had staged that charade to hunt wolves, to expose the rot he knew existed beneath the veneer of his fortune. But instead of growls and Machiavellian schemes, he was hearing the soft voice of a woman who promised to care to care for him, for his daughter, for his home, without asking for anything in return, without expecting recognition. Jinwoo's mind, accustomed to analyzing complex contracts and market strategies, now struggled to process the simplicity of that kindness. He felt like a scientist who, instead of finding the expected particle, discovers a completely new element, challenging all his known laws. Minji, oblivious to the silent storm raging within the unconscious man before her, finished cleaning the bookshelf. She picked up a random book, a volume of classical poetry Jinwoo had never read, only kept for show, and leafed through it for a moment, a small, melancholic smile on her lips. "It's a beautiful book," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I think beauty is important, even when life is hard." She carefully placed it back, her fingers brushing the cover. Jinwoo observed every movement, every nuance of her expression. He noticed the slight wrinkle in her brow when she thought, the way her eyes shone with a stillness he'd never seen in anyone. He wondered about her life, about what had shaped her to be so different. Where did this ability come from to see beauty and loneliness in a man the world saw only as power? Later, the silence of the night hung over the mansion. Ha-eun was sleeping soundly, and Minji, after checking on the girl, returned to the main room. She sat in a discreet armchair, took a small notebook and pen from her bag, and began to write. Jinwoo couldn't see what she was writing, but the image of her, absorbed in her thoughts, seemed so peaceful, so real, in contrast to the artificiality of his own state. He heard her sigh softly. "Mr. Lee," she said, her voice almost a whisper in the night's silence. "I know you can't hear me, but I feel like I need to talk. Ha-eun told me you've always been very busy, and that your wife, well, that she's been gone for a long time." Jinwoo felt a tightening in his chest. No one dared to mention his deceased wife, much less with such delicacy. "It must be hard for you, to lose someone you love, and then have to be strong for your daughter and for your company. It's a lot to carry alone." A tear rolled down Minji's face, glistening in the dim lamplight. She wiped it away quickly, as if embarrassed. "I know what it's like to lose someone, and I know what it's like to feel lonely. But you're not completely alone, Mr. Lee. Your daughter needs you, and I'll be here to help. I promise." Minji's words, spoken with such raw and sincere vulnerability, hit Jinwoo with the force of a punch. He wasn't just hearing compassion. He was hearing empathy. She didn't see him as the unreachable CEO, but as a wounded man, a lonely father. She had seen through his armor, not with malice, but with a painful and beautiful clarity. Her promise, "I promise," resonated in his mind. He had spent his life distrusting promises, loyalties, but hers seemed pure, unwavering. The cynicism that defined him was crumbling. Not under the weight of betrayal, but under the warmth of kindness. Not just out of curiosity, but out of an urgent need to understand how someone could be so human. The search for traitors suddenly seemed a secondary task. The true mission, he realized, was to unravel the mystery of this woman who unknowingly was rebuilding his world, brick by brick, with the simple strength of her soul. And for the first time in years, Lee Jinwoo ardently wished to wake up. The desire wasn't to regain control of his company, nor to confront the traitors he hoped to unmask. It was to look into Park Minji's eyes, to understand the depth of her soul, to unravel the mystery of her kindness. The night advanced, and the mansion's silence seemed to carry the weight of Jinwoo's newly awakened emotions. He remained motionless, but his mind worked at full speed, replaying Minji's every word. To lose someone you love. It's a lot to carry alone. The phrase echoed his own pain, a wound he thought he had sealed with an impenetrable armor of work and arrogance. No one, not even his closest family, had dared to touch on that subject with such delicacy, with such compassion. The next morning, The soft light of dawn filtered through the silk curtains, painting the room with golden hues. Jinwoo smelled fresh coffee and something sweet. Pancakes, perhaps, coming from the kitchen. Minji was already up. He heard her talking softly with Ha-yun, her voice a balm to his ears. "Good morning, Ha-yuna," Minji said, and Jinwoo imagined the gentle smile on her face. "How about some pancakes with honey today? Your daddy likes honey, doesn't he?" Ha-yun responded with an animated murmur. Jinwoo felt a tightening in his chest. Minji wasn't just taking care of the girl, she was trying to maintain a connection with him, even though he was unconscious. She was making an effort to understand the family's tastes and habits, to bring a little normalcy and warmth to a home that had become cold and distant. Later, Minji entered Jinwoo's room, carrying a tray with a small vase of fresh flowers, simple yet vibrant daisies. She placed them on the bedside table next to the medical monitors. "Mr. Lee," she whispered, her voice laden with a melancholic sweetness, "I think a little color would do this room good, and you too." She lightly touched Jinwoo's hand, a touch so soft he almost doubted it had happened. There was nothing professional or distant. It was a touch of genuine care. He felt the warmth of her fingers for a brief moment, and an electric shock ran through his arm. It was the first time anyone had touched him with such tenderness since the accident, perhaps since his wife's death. His body, previously an inert shell, seemed to vibrate with her proximity. Minji then sat in the armchair, picked up the notebook she had used the night before, and began to write again. Jinwoo couldn't see the content, but the image of her concentrated, with her brows slightly furrowed in thought, was of a serene beauty that captivated him. "I was thinking," she murmured, without taking her eyes off the notebook, as if talking to an invisible confidant. "About what you said, Ha-yuna, about your daddy being strong. He is, but even the strongest need someone to hold their hand, don't they?" She sighed, and Jinwoo realized she wasn't just talking about herself, but projecting her own experience of loss and loneliness. "I know you have many responsibilities, Mr. Lee," she continued, her voice almost a thread, "and that people expect a lot from you. But I hope you know that you don't have to carry everything alone. Ha-yun needs you, and she loves you very much. And I'll make sure she feels that every day." Minji's words weren't just promises of care, they were promises of love and presence, something Jinwoo, in his wealth and power, had neglected or lost. He had built an empire, but had left a vacuum in his heart and in his home. Minji, with her simplicity, was filling that void brick by brick with a compassion he never knew he needed. The search for traitors, for revenge, for justice, all of it seemed to diminish in importance. What mattered now was Minji's soft voice, the gentle touch of her fingers, the silent promise in her eyes. He needed to wake up, not to punish, but to understand, to know the woman who unknowingly was healing his heart. Lee Jinwoo, the arrogant and lonely CEO, felt a new urgency. He needed to recover, not just to resume his life, but to discover who Park Min-ji was and what this strange and unsettling sense of hope meant for him. He needed answers only she could give, and he was willing to wait and to observe until the right moment. The days transformed into a peculiar routine for Jinwoo. He was a silent spectator of his own life, and Min-ji was the unexpected protagonist. Each morning brought a new detail about her, the way she sang softly while tidying Ha-yun's room, the infinite patience with which she helped the girl draw, the scent of lavender that accompanied her when she entered his room to check the monitors. One afternoon, the door to Jinwoo's room opened with a familiar creak. It was his younger sister, Lee Ji-yeon, an elegant and always impeccable woman, but with an air of coldness that Jinwoo always associated with his own ambition. She didn't come alone. Beside her was Kang Min-jun, the vice president of his company, a man Jin-woo deeply distrusted. "How is he, Ji-yeon?" Min-jun asked, his voice polished, but with a tone Jin-woo perceived as calculating. "The same as always, Min-jun-si," Ji-yeon replied without even approaching the bed. Her eyes swept the room, briefly stopping at Minji's daisies. "The doctors say there are no changes. It's frustrating." "I understand," Min-jun said, and Jin-woo felt a shiver. "The company is under pressure. Shareholders are restless. We need a more robust contingency plan." Jin-woo, motionless, felt rage bubble up. They were talking about him as if he were a defective asset, not a human being. "I'm doing my best to keep everything under control," Ji-yeon stated defensively, "but it's difficult with his absence, and with Ha-eun needing constant attention." "The nanny is taking care of her, isn't she?" Min-jun asked, a slight disdain in his voice. "Park Min-ji, right? A simple girl from what I hear. I hope she's competent." Jin-woo felt a violent impulse to get up and confront them. Simple? Competent? Min-ji was the only person in that house who showed true competence and a pure heart. "She's adequate," Ji-yeon said with a sigh, "but it's not like she can solve the company's problems." They continued to discuss numbers, strategies, and the growing pressure from the board, their voices muffled but clear enough for Jin-woo to grasp the essence of their concern, not for his recovery, but for the empire he had built. There wasn't a single word of affection, of genuine concern for his health. It was all about power and money. When they finally left, the silence that followed was heavy. Jin-woo felt an icy void, a brutal contrast to the warmth Min-ji had brought. He had spent his entire life seeking power and recognition, and now, in his state of vulnerability, he realized how superficial was the love and loyalty that surrounded him. Shortly after, Min-ji entered the room. She didn't know about the visit, but her eyes fell on the flowers on the bedside table. She watered them carefully, a small smile on her lips. "They're holding up well, Mr. Lee," she whispered, as if sharing a secret, "like Ha-eun, strong, despite everything." She then looked at Jin-woo, and for an instant he felt as if she could see through his charade. "Don't worry about what others say or think. What matters is what you feel in here." She lightly touched her own chest over her heart. "And I know you have a good heart, Mr. Lee. You just need to remember that." Her words, so simple and sincere, were a balm for the wound Ji-yeon and Min-jun had reopened. Jin-woo felt a wave of gratitude and a renewed determination. He needed to wake up, not just to unmask the traitors, but to protect Min-ji from the coldness of his world, and to discover if her kindness could, in fact, heal his heart. He wanted her to know that he did have a good heart, and that she was the only one who had seen it. The weight was becoming unbearable. Every second of immobility was torture for Lee Jin-woo, who now felt time slipping through his fingers, not as an opportunity to plan his revenge, but as an obstacle to the truth he yearned to discover about Park Min-ji. He wanted to get up, to speak, to touch her, but the charade held him captive, a prisoner in his own body. That same afternoon, while Ha-eun took her nap and the mansion plunged into a temporary silence, Min-ji entered Jin-woo's room. She carried a small bowl of fresh fruit and a damp cloth. With delicate movements, she began to clean the medical equipment, the dust from the shelves, and finally Jin-woo's skin. "Mr. Lee," she whispered, her voice soft as a breeze. "Today, Ha-eun asked me when you're going to wake up. I told her you're fighting hard and that you'll be back soon to hug her." She moistened the cloth and gently passed it over Jin-woo's face. The touch was light, but laden with a tenderness he had never experienced. He felt the coolness of the water and the warmth of her fingers, and a shiver ran through his body. It was a touch of care, of hope, of an intimacy he didn't remember sharing with anyone. "I know you must be tired of hearing this," she continued. unaware of the turmoil her words caused within him. But don't give up. Ha-Yun needs you. And I feel you have so much to offer this world, Mr. Lee, not just as a powerful CEO, but as a person. I see it. She saw him. She saw something beyond his wealth, his arrogance, his reputation. She saw the person behind the facade, the man he had forgotten he was. Her words were a mirror reflecting an image he had distorted for years. As Minji finished cleaning, the room door opened again. It was Ji-yeon, accompanied this time by an elegant and imposing woman with perfectly styled hair and a forced smile. Jin-woo recognized her as Kim Yoon-ji, daughter of an influential shareholder and an old acquaintance who had always shown interest in his fortune and position. "Ah, Min-ji-shi," Ji-yeon said with a tone bordering on condescending. "You're here. Yoon-ji came to visit. She's an old family friend." Yoon-ji, without even looking at Min-ji, approached Jin-woo's bed. Her eyes swept the room with an air of disapproval, stopping at the simple daisies on the bedside table. "Poor Jin-woo-si," she murmured, her voice sugary, yet with a hint of coldness. "It's so sad to see him like this. The company is a mess, and Ha-eun must be so lost." She then looked at Min-ji with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're the nanny, right, Park Min-ji? I hope you're managing. Taking care of a child in a situation like this is a huge responsibility. And the mansion, it's a lot for someone so inexperienced." Jin-woo felt his blood boil. Inexperienced. Min-ji was the only person who was holding his home and his daughter together, the only one who brought warmth and life to that place. Min-ji, however, remained calm. She bowed slightly. "I'm doing my best, Ms. Kim. Ha-eun is a lovely girl, and I'm dedicated to caring for her and the house." Of course," Yoon-ji said, waving her hand as if dismissing the answer. "But perhaps it's time to consider someone with more experience to manage everything. Someone who knows the Lee family's standards, wouldn't you say, Ji-yeon?" Ji-yeon nodded without hesitation. "Yes, Yoon-ji has a point. The situation is delicate. Perhaps we should discuss this, Min-ji-shi." Jin-woo's heart pounded. They were talking about firing Min-ji, about taking her away from his home, from his daughter, from his life. The rage he felt was overwhelming, a primal desire to protect Min-ji from the coldness and judgment of his own world. He wanted to scream. He wanted to get up and throw Yoon-ji and Ji-yeon out. He wanted to tell them that Min-ji was the only person worthy of being there. Min-ji felt Jin-woo's gaze on her, or perhaps it was just her imagination. She touched his hand again, an unconscious gesture of comfort, both for him and for herself. "Mr. Lee is a strong man," she said, her voice firm, despite the pressure. "And Ha-eun needs stability now. I promised her I would be here." Yoon-ji chuckled softly, a dry, humorless sound. "Promises are easy to break, dear, especially when reality sets in." Jin-woo felt an urgency that surpassed any desire for revenge or power. He needed to wake up, not just to unmask the traitors, but to defend Min-ji, to protect her from the cruelty and cynicism that surrounded him. He needed her to know that he valued her kindness, her strength, her presence. The weight had become not only unbearable but dangerous. He could no longer afford to be a spectator. He needed to act, and he needed to act soon. Jin-woo's urgency was a fire burning beneath the surface of his immobility. Every word from Yoon-ji and Ji-yeon was a blow, not against him, but against the only person who had brought light to his darkness. He felt his blood boil, a cold and calculated rage that eclipsed any desire for corporate revenge. Now it was personal. "With all due respect, Ms. Kim," Min-ji said, her voice calm but with surprising firmness, "Ms. Ha-eun is adapting well. She is a resilient child and needs routine and affection. I strive to offer that to her." Yoon-ji let out a short, disdainful laugh. "Affection is one thing, Min-ji-si, but the Lee family has standards. Hakyun's education, her future, all of it requires a more sophisticated approach. Someone who understands the complexity of our social circle, for example. She looked at Ji-yeon, who nodded in agreement. Yoonji is right, Ji-yeon interjected, her voice softer but equally sharp. Min-ji, you're a good person. But the Lee Mansion is no place for amateurs. There are events, meetings, the media. It's a different world than you're used to. Perhaps it would be better for everyone if you considered other opportunities. Jinwoo felt his entire body tremble, a silent fury threatening to erupt. Amateurs, other opportunities. They were trying to discard Minji as if she were an object, not a human being who had dedicated her heart to his daughter and his home. The image of Ha-eun crying for the nanny who loved her more than anyone else in that house formed in his mind, and that was the last straw. Minji took a deep breath, her eyes meeting Jinwoo's for a brief instant. He didn't know if she truly saw him or if it was just the strength of his own projected will. I understand your concerns, she said, her voice now a little more tense but still controlled. But I made a promise to Ha-eun, and I take my promises seriously. And I believe Mr. Lee also values loyalty. The mention of loyalty sent an electric shock through Jinwoo. She was speaking directly to him, even without knowing. She was defending not only her place, but also the integrity that he, in his charade, was trying to rediscover. Yoonji scoffed. Loyalty is a luxury we can't always afford, dear, especially when larger interests are at stake. She approached Jinwoo's bed, running her cold, perfectly manicured hand over the sheet. Jinwoo has always been a practical man. He would understand the need to make difficult decisions for the good of the family and the company. Exactly, Ji-yeon agreed, looking at Minji with a look that said, it's the end of the line. We'll start looking for someone more suitable. You can help us with the transition, Minji. It will be for a short period. The idea of Minji leaving, of her lavender scent disappearing from the house, of her soft laughter no longer echoing through the corridors, was unbearable for Jinwoo. He couldn't allow it, he couldn't. He concentrated all his will, all his rage, all his growing affection for Minji into a single point. He felt a twinge in his right index finger, a sensation he hadn't experienced in months. With a strength that seemed to come from somewhere deep and unexplored, he moved his finger. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. But it was a movement. No one noticed. Yoonji and Ji-yeon were busy discussing the details of the transition, and Minji's eyes were fixed on Jinwoo, as if seeking an answer, a sign from him. But Jinwoo knew. He had moved. The first step had been taken. He was no longer a spectator. He was coming back. And when he returned, the first thing he would do was defend Park Min-ji, the woman who, with her humility and kindness, had won his arrogant heart. The wait was over. He was ready to fight. The door to Jinwoo's room opened again, and this time it was Dr. Kim, the family's private physician, who entered, accompanied by a nurse. "Excuse me, ladies," he said, with a professional yet somewhat hurried tone. "It's time for Mr. Lee's daily evaluation." Yoonji and Ji-yeon exchanged annoyed glances, but moved away from the bed. Minji took the opportunity to step back a little, feeling the weight of the tension slightly decrease, but the threat still hung in the air. As Dr. Kim checked Jinwoo's vital signs, he noticed something. His eyes narrowed slightly as he watched the pulse monitor. The nurse, oblivious, adjusted one of the machines. "Doctor?" Ji-yeon asked, impatient. "Any news?" Dr. Kim didn't answer immediately. He picked up a small flashlight and examined Jinwoo's eyes. For a brief moment, an almost imperceptible flicker of reaction could be seen. It was so quick that he almost doubted what he saw. He repeated the test. This time the reflex was a little more pronounced. "Interesting," Dr. Kim murmured, more to himself than to the others. "What's interesting, Doctor?" Yunji asked, her voice laden with a curiosity that bordered on anxiety. The doctor turned, a slight smile beginning to form on his lips. It seems Mr. Lee may be showing some signs of recovery. Very, very subtle, but there's a small change in pupillary response and a slight increase in brain activity that we haven't seen before. A shocked silence filled the room. Ji-yeon paled. Yunji, on the other hand, looked like a statue, her forced smile frozen on her face. Minji, watching from afar, felt a warmth spread through her chest, a wave of hope that made her hold her breath. Jinwoo, inside, felt a silent triumph. Dr. Kim had noticed. The game was about to change. The charade was coming to an end, and he was ready to face them all, especially to protect the woman who had awakened his heart. The air in the room, already heavy with tension, became dense and almost suffocating. Yunji was the first to break the silence, her voice a little sharper than usual. "Signs of recovery? Doctor, are you sure? Wouldn't it be a misreading? He's been in a coma for months." Her question, though disguised as concern, carried a note of barely contained desperation. Dr. Kim, a middle-aged man with years of experience, remained calm. "Ms. Kim, my equipment is state-of-the-art, and my observations are accurate. The signs are minimal, I reiterate, but they are consistent. I'm not saying he'll wake up tomorrow, but there's an activity that indicates a possible path to consciousness." He gestured to the nurse, who began to make meticulous notes in the electronic medical record. Ji-yeon, who until then seemed to have lost her color, recovered slightly. "But that's good, isn't it? For the family, for the company?" She tried to force a smile, but her eyes betrayed her panic. The prospect of Jinwoo waking up meant the end of their plans, the unmasking of their intentions. Minji, in the corner of the room, felt tears welling in her eyes. They weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming relief. The idea that Jinwoo might have a chance to recover, to return to Ha-eun, was a balm to her soul. She looked at his motionless face, and for an instant she swore she saw a slight twitch in his lips, a sign that he was listening, understanding. Jinwoo indeed was. Every word from Dr. Kim was music to his ears, and Yunji and Ji-yeon's reaction was exactly what he expected. The panic in their eyes, the attempt to downplay the news, all confirmed his suspicions. He felt a wave of power and control he hadn't felt since before the accident. The game was turning. "We will monitor Mr. Lee even more closely over the next 24 hours, Dr. Kim continued, oblivious to the emotional storm brewing around him. "It could be a false alarm, but it could also be the beginning of something significant. I will keep you informed." Yunji forced a laugh. "Of course, Doctor. It's unexpected news. But, about the matter we were discussing earlier." She cast a sharp glance at Minji, trying to regain control of the narrative. "We still need to ensure Ha-eun has the best possible care, regardless of Mr. Lee's situation." "Absolutely," Ji-yeon hastened to agree, trying to divert the focus. "Minji, perhaps it would be good for you to start preparing Ha-eun for a possible change, so that she doesn't feel the transition as much in case Mr. Lee needs a calmer environment for his recovery, and she needs a more experienced nanny." Their audacity, even in the face of the news of Jinwoo's possible recovery, was astounding. They were desperate to get rid of Minji before he could intervene. Jinwoo felt the fury return, even more intense. Experienced? Calmer? They were using his own recovery as an excuse to push away the only person who truly cared about Ha-eun. Minji, however, was not so easily swayed. The hope Dr. Kim had ignited in her gave her new strength. "I understand your concern," she said, her voice firm and clear, "but Ms. Ha-eun is doing well with me, and if Mr. Lee is truly recovering, I believe he will want his daughter and the people who love her close by." She looked at Jinwoo again, a look of silent defiance towards the two women, and one of support and faith for the man in the bed. Jinwoo felt his heart swell. She was incredible. Even under pressure, she stood firm, defending not only herself, but the connection she had built with Ha-eun. He could no longer remain silent. The charade had served its purpose. It was time to act. With a monumental effort, he concentrated all his energy. His index finger, which had already moved, now twitched again, a little stronger, and then, with an almost inaudible sigh, his eyes opened, just a slit, but enough to see Minji's worried face and the calculating glances of Yoonji and Ji-yeon. The game was over, and he was ready to play for real. A deafening silence fell over the room. The nurse, who was adjusting a monitor, dropped her pen with a small click. Dr. Kim, who had his back to Jinwoo, turned abruptly, his eyes widening at the flicker of consciousness. "Mr. Lee," he murmured, quickly approaching the bed. "Can you hear me?" Jinwoo's eyes moved slightly, fixing on the doctor for an instant before sliding to Minji. He couldn't speak, couldn't move much, but his gaze was unmistakable. There was recognition, an intensity that hadn't been there before. Minji brought her hands to her mouth, a sob escaping her lips. Tears of pure joy streamed down her face. He was awake. He really was awake. The hope she felt materialized before her eyes. Yoonji and Ji-yeon were petrified. Yoonji's forced smile completely disappeared, replaced by an expression of pure horror. Ji-yeon paled even more, her hands visibly trembling. Reality hit them like a lightning bolt. Jinwoo was no longer an inert puppet. He was a conscious man, and he had witnessed everything. "Incredible, Doctor," Kim exclaimed, picking up the flashlight again and examining Jinwoo's eyes more carefully. "The pupillary response is strong. Mr. Lee, if you can, squeeze my hand." He extended his hand to Jinwoo. With a visible effort, Jinwoo's hand moved, and his fingers, weakly yet firmly enough to be undeniable, wrapped around the doctor's. "It's a miracle," the nurse whispered, her eyes welling up. Jinwoo felt a wave of exhaustion, but also of an iron determination. He had done it. He was back. And the first thing he did was look at Minji, a look that promised protection and gratitude. He saw the joy in her eyes, the genuine concern, and his heart, which was once an impenetrable fortress, filled with an overwhelming tenderness. "They won't touch her," he thought. His mind still a little blurry, but the message was clear. Never. Yoonji, desperately trying to compose herself, forced a trembling smile. "Jinwoo-si, thank goodness. What wonderful news. We were so worried." Her voice was shrill, and her eyes avoided Jinwoo's. Ji-yeon tried to imitate her aunt, but her voice failed. "Yes, Jinwoo-si, it's such a relief." Jinwoo, without taking his eyes off Minji for more than a second, moved his head slightly, an almost imperceptible gesture, but one that for him meant, "I saw, I heard, and I haven't forgotten." Dr. Kim, oblivious to the underlying tension, was euphoric. "We need to transfer Mr. Lee to the ICU for intensive monitoring immediately. Nurse, prepare everything. I'll contact the neurology team." As the nurse hurried to make the calls, Yoonji and Ji-yeon exchanged glances, panic etched on their faces. Their plans had crumbled in an instant. The man they thought was in a coma, unable to react, had woken up at the worst possible moment for them. Minji, still crying but with a radiant smile, took a step forward as if wanting to touch Jinwoo's hand. He watched her, and in his eyes, she saw something new, something that made her blush and feel a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something deeper, more intimate. Jinwoo closed his eyes again, exhaustion overwhelming him, but not before a last clear thought. The game is over, but the real battle is just beginning, and I will fight for her. The sound of the gurney wheels echoed down the corridor. a somber melody for Yunji and Ji-yeon, and a hymn of hope for Minji. Jin-woo, now with his eyes closed again, was being carefully transferred to the ICU. Exhaustion had overcome him, but his mind was clearer than ever. Every word, every glance, every gesture he had witnessed while feigning a coma was etched in his memory. And the image of Minji, her voice firm and her face bathed in tears of joy, was the most vivid of all. "Ms. Park, please accompany us to the waiting room," Dr. Kim instructed, his voice still vibrant with euphoria. "We need space for the neurology team. We will keep you informed." Minji nodded, unable to speak, her throat tight with emotion. She gave one last look at Jin-woo, who seemed to be sleeping deeply, and felt a pang of anxiety. He was awake, but still so fragile. As the gurney was wheeled away, Yunji and Ji-yeon hurried to follow, their expressions a mixture of forced relief and thinly veiled panic. "We're coming too," Yunji said, her voice a little louder than necessary. "We're his family." Dr. Kim merely nodded, absorbed in his medical thoughts. In the waiting room, the silence was heavy. Minji sat in one of the chairs, her hands clasped in her lap, still processing the miracle she had witnessed. The tears dried on her face, but the feeling of warmth and hope remained. Yunji and Ji-yeon, however, couldn't stay still. They moved away to a corner, their voices low and urgent. "This is a disaster, Aunt," Ji-yeon whispered, her eyes wide. "He heard everything, everything." Yunji ran a hand through her hair, her face pale. I know, but we need to stay calm. He's still weak. Maybe he won't remember everything. Maybe we can. We can say we were just worried." "Worried?" Ji-yeon scoffed. "You called him dead weight, and I suggested the nanny be replaced by someone more experienced while he was recovering. He's not stupid, Aunt." "Shut up, Ji-yeon. Someone might hear us," Yunji hissed, casting a furtive glance at Minji, who had her back to them but seemed to absorb every word. "We need to think, fast. If he really remembers, we're lost. The company, the inheritance, everything." Minji, though not intentionally paying attention, couldn't help but catch fragments of their conversation. The words disaster, remember, a company, inheritance floated towards her, confirming her suspicions about the two women's true intentions. A wave of revulsion hit her. How could they be so calculating, even after Jin-woo had woken up? Meanwhile, in the ICU, Jin-woo was being connected to a series of monitors. The medical team worked efficiently, but he barely registered them. His mind was on Minji, on her unwavering loyalty, on her pure kindness. He remembered every time she defended Ha-eun, every time she spoke to him, the man in a coma, with a tenderness no one else had shown. "They thought I was a puppet," he thought, feeling a cold anger. They thought they could get rid of Minji, push Ha-eun away and take everything. But they were wrong. He felt a slight tremor in his hand. It was Dr. Kim checking his reflexes. Jin-woo squeezed the doctor's hand more firmly than before, a sign of his growing determination. "Excellent, Mr. Lee," Dr. Kim said, a genuine smile on his face. "You are progressing wonderfully. Now rest. We have a long road ahead, but the worst is over." Jin-woo closed his eyes again, but this time it wasn't from total exhaustion, but to focus. He had a lot to plan. The charade had revealed the truth. Now it was time for the truth to reveal itself to the world, and he would ensure that Minji was by his side when that happened. He would protect her. He would defend her, and he would love her. The battle had begun, and he was ready to fight for everything that mattered. The following days were a mix of recovery and tension. Jin-woo, though still weak, regained strength with surprising speed, driven by his determination. He asked to see Ha-eun first, and the reunion with his daughter was a moment of pure emotion, with Minji by his side, watching with a heart tight with joy. "Appa missed you so much, my love," Jin-woo whispered, his voice hoarse, hugging Ha-eun. He looked at Minji, a gleam of gratitude and something deeper in his eyes. Thank you, Minji, for everything, for taking care of her, for not giving up on me. Minji just smiled, tears returning to her eyes. I would never give up, Mr. Lee. Yoonji and Ji-yeon tried to visit, but were politely yet firmly barred by Dr. Kim, under the patient's instructions to prioritize rest. The message was clear. A week later, Jin-woo was strong enough for an urgently called press conference. The room was packed with journalists, eager for news of the CEO who had miraculously awakened from his coma. Jin-woo, pale but with a firm posture, sat at the front with Minji and Ha-yoon discreetly seated in the front row, at his request. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, Jin-woo began, his voice resonating with a new authority. My recovery was a miracle, and I am grateful to the medical team. But there are people who were essential to my survival and to my daughter's well-being. He paused, his eyes fixed on Minji. During my time in a coma, I heard, I felt, and I saw the true nature of the people around me. A murmur ran through the room. Yoonji and Ji-yeon, who were in the back, paled. I saw the unwavering loyalty of Ms. Park Minji, my daughter Lee Ha-yoon's nanny, Jin-woo continued, his voice growing stronger. She not only cared for Ha-yoon with love and dedication, but she also defended me, even when I was unconscious. She is the personification of kindness and integrity. He turned to Minji, who was shocked, her face flushed. Minji, you showed me what truly matters. You broke the ice of my arrogant and lonely heart. You taught me to love again. He stood up, walked to her, and extended his hand. I don't just want you to take care of Ha-eun. I want you to be part of our family. I want you by my side, as my partner, my confidant, my love. The room erupted in flashes and murmurs. Minji, with tears in her eyes, accepted his hand. Yoonji and Ji-yeon tried to protest, but were ignored. Jin-woo's arrogance had been conquered, not by wealth or status, but by Minji's humility and kindness. As of today, Jin-woo declared, holding Minji's hand and pulling her to stand beside him, with Ha-yoon between them, Ms. Park, Minji is an irreplaceable part of my life and my daughter's life, and anyone who tries to harm or belittle her will have to deal directly with me. He looked at the cameras and then at Yoonji and Ji-yeon, a cold warning in his eyes. As for the changes in the company and the family, well, that's just the beginning. Minji felt the warmth of Jin-woo's hand in hers, the weight of Ha-yoon nestling against her leg. The world might be in shock, but for her, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where kindness had triumphed over cruelty and love had found its way into a heart once closed. The battle was over, and the victory was theirs.